Firstly, thank you everyone that is here. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our third live webinar in our series looking at giving yourself the best opportunity to reach the top. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mira and I head up our D&I team here at Harrison Holgate. In today's webinar, we're going to be discussing accessing diverse talent pools within the insurance market, particularly looking at what works, what doesn't work, and what we can be doing to access those from marginalised groups to diversify the sector. I'm joined today by three amazing panelists. Hi guys, I'm super excited to be having this conversation with you. So I've got Karen, who is the HR Director at Chartered Insurance Institute. I've got Aaron, who is a race car driver for Team Brit. I'll get him to talk about Team Brit in a little bit more detail. And Bookie, who is the founder of Diversity Think Tank, as well as the author of I Don't Understand, which is a guide to navigating bias. As mentioned, I will let you guys, introduce yourselves and your journeys. But from my side, what I'm most excited about is the different perspectives you'll be bringing into this conversation. So Karen, for example, I know you've worked in various sectors before moving into insurance. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about your perspective of how we can diversify insurance when you're comparing it to other sectors and what we can be doing better. Aaron, since taking over, the D&I agenda, I've tried really hard to find success stories of those with visible and non-visible disabilities in senior positions, but I struggled to find many, if I'm honest. So again, I can't wait to hear your story and what you think this industry can be doing to increase diversity from a disability and neurodiversity perspective. And Bookie, we've had many conversations. We've been talking for several months now, and every time we do, you always give me something new to think about. So I'm really looking forward to getting your perspective as well on this conversation. Before we sort of, get you guys to introduce yourselves, just to let you know, for everyone joining, we will be holding a Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So do feel free to share your questions using the Q&A box. We really want you guys to contribute and make this session interactive. So please do send those across. We've also got a comments box so you can share your thoughts on the topics we're covering as well. So yeah, it'll be really good now to kind of hear from you guys, find out a bit more about what's brought you here and the work you've been doing in the D&I space. So Karen, should we start with you?
Hi, thank you very much, Mira. Hello everyone, good to be here. So yes, my name's Karen Thomas. As Mira said, I'm the HR Director at the Chartered Insurance Institute. So we are an organisation that works in the insurance space, really trying to build public trust in the value of our in the power of our professional standards. D&I is hugely important to us. We know that for many organisations it's a differentiator. The evidence is there in terms of organisations perform better if they have greater diversity. I'm always a little bit sensitive when I use the word diversity because of course the most important thing is inclusion. But we know that organisations perform better. So the stats are there, the business case is there. I again feel a little bit uncomfortable when I talk about the business case, because for me, probably the biggest thing is the moral case. It's just right, it's just fair. So we know the stats there. We know that all organisations, probably most organisations in the insurance sector, want a modern and diverse organisation. So my role is within the CII to role model best practice, to be able to influence, to be able to share ideas, to bring people together, discuss, to learn from each other, share best practice, challenge, and try and do what we can to take the sector forward in terms of creating more diverse, modern, open organisations, which are three of our important values at the CII.
Thank you. No, that's really, really good to know. I really like that you touched on inclusion as well, because it's such an important thing. It is about creating that inclusive environment. Brilliant. And Aaron, did you want to sort of introduce Team Brit and then, of course, what you've been doing as well in your journey so far?
Of course, yeah. So my name's Aaron Morgan. Thanks everybody for joining and hopefully finding this little section interesting. So I'm a racing driver for Team Brit. Now we're a disabled racing team, as I said, made up of all disabled drivers, whether that be physical or mental disabilities as well. So I myself, I'm paralysed from the waist down, but I race in an Aston Martin Vantage V8, it's a V8 GT4 car with an autistic teammate called Bobby Trundley. Now we are disability, diversity and inclusion in action. We're out there proving in a completely able-bodied race that disabled people can compete on a completely level playing field. And we've actually managed to win a couple of our races so far this year. So like I say, we are real life diversity and inclusion in action. Now, the key thing with Team Brit is their world leading hand control technology means that people such as myself are able to compete on a level playing field. It means that I can race with two hands on the steering wheel at all times when I'm driving the car. And the real beauty of it is excuse me, that the controls can be adapted to suit multiple different disabilities. So with the Aston Martin, which Bobby and I race, I can use it completely on hand controls. Bobby can use it using his feet, and there's buttons on the steering wheel to change gear. And then we've got another driver within our team who only has use of his right arm. So he can then use a hybrid of the two. So he can use his feet for accelerator and brake, and then obviously use the steering wheel to steer and change the gear of the car as well. So we're knocking down barriers all the time, proving that motorsport is the only sport in the world where disabled people can compete on a completely level playing field with the able-bodied drivers in the race.
That's incredible. That's actually inspirational, and well done on the wins as well that you've had this year. Thank you for that, Aaron. That's amazing. I can't wait to hear more from you, about what we can be doing to make it not just the motorsports industry, but across the board where we're getting the same sort of inclusion and diversity. And finally, Bookie, I know we've spoken, but it'll be great to hear more about your journey and sort of find out what's brought you to creating your book and creating a diversity think tank.
Well, yeah, thanks. And hi again, and thanks for having me again, right? So look, I'm the founder of Diversity Think Tank, and we're a diversity and inclusion consultants, and we specialize in navigating bias. That is, as opposed to traditional unconscious bias development, consultancy and training, we believe in bias navigation and navigating the inevitability of bias towards minorities and marginalized groups. And how I got into this is, in particular in this sector, is because I run another practice called Rosa CAD, Results Oriented Sales Academy, and that's primarily focused around sales training and increasing the productivity of professional services staff, particularly insurance-based insurance in the insurance sector. And I've been doing that for around we're in our 21st year now. And during that time, I've observed and trained people at a very granular level, for many years. And so as a result of doing that, I was observing human behavior. And this is how I began to see inclusion, or the lack thereof, within the organizations that I was working in. And since the majority of those were insurance companies or insurance brokers, I got a very good take on what was happening in this world. And as a result of that, I felt compelled to start addressing diversity and inclusion, and the role that bias plays in supporting or stifling careers of minorities and marginalized groups. And so as a result of that, I ended up writing a book called I Don't Understand, a practical guide to navigating bias in the workplace. And this has informed my views on all things diversity and inclusion. And hopefully you can benefit from that today.
Yes, definitely. Well, we have the last two sessions, so I'm pretty sure it'll be no different this time round. Thanks again for that, Vicky. So let's jump right in. I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's talk about accessing those from marginalised groups. Now, this is a topic that has been, a subject of D&I discussion for quite some time now, about how we actually diversify the industry and bring people in from different walks of life. but I still feel there's so much progress that needs to be made. We're not where we need to be, and so something, you know, needs to change. Now, before I ask my first question, I did want to run a quick poll. You'll realise that I do enjoy polls with our audience, just to get their perspective on the current state of talent pools within insurance. So I'm just going to run that now, and I'll give you guys sort of 60 seconds to select your answer, and then it'll be great after to be able to share the results and get your guys' thoughts on the outcome of what's come through. So I'm just going to run it now. Let's launch that. Okay, so you should all hopefully be able to see that now. So the question is, do you think the talent pool is wide enough to reduce disproportionate underrepresentation of people from marginalized groups? Yes, no, or don't know. Okay, this is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what people come up with.
Yeah. We're nearly there. We've only got a few more people to answer.
Great. Hope we're getting 100% voting. Some people get shy.
We're at 92%, so we're not far off.
All right, cool. Don't be shy, give it a try. I was trying to think of another rhyme, but I couldn't really come up with one, so we'll just
Try rhymes.
Yeah, that does.
Amazing. So I'm just going to end that now. It's quite unanimous. So let's share those. Hopefully you guys can see the results. So we've got 22% who have said yes, 59% who have said no, and 19% that said don't know. I was sort of expecting a lot more no. Well, I was expecting no to be the highest answer, but I didn't think it would be sort of this much. So it's quite interesting that a lot of people are feeling that the talent pools just aren't diverse enough in the industry. So I guess, you know, an open question to you guys. What are your thoughts on those results? Is that what you were expecting?
Well, personally, I'm a bit. I'm surprised. I thought the no would be a lot higher. So obviously, people feel that. Yeah, I'm surprised actually. I'm quite surprised that the no is not as high. I thought it would be a lot higher. I think no relates to there not being enough people, a bigger enough pool to draw upon, and yeah, I thought the no would be higher. So that's really interesting to me that people actually think that. It'd be interesting to see where people are coming from with that in the chat box. Then about you, Karen, what your view is on that?
Yeah, I think that when I read that question, you could take it sort of in two ways, in that do you consider the talent pool as it is today? And then I would agree and probably vote no. If I were to consider the possible talent pool of the future, I would probably vote yes. And then it's our responsibility to make sure that we're accessing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get those results probably as I would have thought.
Also says something about, I think, about potential as well. I think it's about looking at potential and not looking at the traditional view of what is appropriate for particular types of roles. You know, it's looking at and saying, well, to what extent can these types of people fit into this type of role? When you start to look at it that way, suddenly you not become less obsessed by, no disrespect to Oxbridge and Cambridge and all of these types of places, but you become less obsessed with tertiary education and more focused around experience and skills. Yeah, which is, I think, a more effective way. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that I completely agree with that. So I guess if we do keep that in mind, this question's for you, Karen. So you've mentioned sort of the current talent pool and I guess what the future could look like. What could we be doing to get ourselves to that future state? How can we widen that talent pool?
Yeah, thank you. So first important point, before we get into exploiting, accessing a wider talent pool, I think it's about make sure that our organisation is best placed to receive that talent. So I mentioned at the start in terms of diversity and inclusion, and I'm always against sort of quick fixes which go out and basically end up with data that tells us that we've got a more diverse employee base, for example, which can look good in your stats, and many more of us now are running stats and dashboards and action plans, etc. Can look good, but then you just present a challenge in sustaining that improvement. So as an organization, always look first of all in terms of what does the experience look like when you have a more diverse candidate talent pool and you're bringing those into the organization. Actually, how do you hang on to that talent? That's really important. But then in terms of expanding that talent pool, one of the benefits, and my gosh, we have to look for the opportunities in crisis, don't we? One of the big opportunities of COVID is that there's more flexible way of working. So first it was about increasing that talent pool. So if you always recruit from a specific area, if you are based in a region of the country, for example, there's not London or not a big city, and your talent pool is essentially white, middle class, possibly, then and we can bring in all the other male, middle-aged, etc., then because of we can now work, we've proven that we can work virtually. So increase the talent pool by going to a wider audience, accepting at the CII, for example, we've moved to an anytime, anywhere employment model. We've taken away core hours. You can work wherever you like, as long as we can employ you in that country. So being more flexible and actually accepting that people don't need to be in the office every day. And actually by extending our geographical reach, we can then broaden the talent pool. Other things, for example, include making sure that our hiring managers are trained up. So Buki mentioned about looking for potential. This is difficult. We know all the biases. We prefer to recruit as proven people like us. So making sure that our hiring managers are trained up in terms of recognizing their bias and then doing something to counteract it, so that when we get that talent from other groups, that we're recognizing the talent rather than going for what we may, what most looks like us, etc. And in that, identifying potential, looking broader. So broader, for example, out of sector, the insurance sector is less diverse than the general population. If we're always looking for people with insurance experience, we're automatically limiting our talent pool. Challenge, why is that? Why do they really need to have insurance experience? And actually, is that not something that we can build into the onboarding program? We've got a range of CII exams, etc. Bring people in and maybe take them through examination routes so that they can gain the knowledge and sector experience that they need. And thirdly, in terms of then when we look at CVs, challenging a little bit in terms of our requirements. I'll give you a specific example here that I think still today, but definitely a few years ago, there was always a requirement to look for candidates that were considered to be stable. So you wanted to see some stability on a CV. You wanted to be able to identify a track record of probably 3-4 years of different jobs by the time the person reached 35, 40. Not so important, obviously, with younger people. That's changed. Actually, we all accept that jobs, there tends to be far greater turnover. Surprise, surprise, if you're looking for somebody that's ambitious, that wants to get on, that's learning fast, they're probably going to move jobs more often. But also, if you want to attract candidates from more diverse communities, it's accepting that a larger proportion of Black people, for example, work in the gig economy. It's harder for people from ethnic minorities to get that permanent long-term job. They tend to do more fixed-term contracts. So if you're going at candidates that only have a track record of 3-4 year jobs, 3-4 years in each job, you're automatically reducing your talent pool. So challenge yourself in terms of why are you requiring that, and then actually what impact that's going to have on the talent that you're probably missing out on. And then other things like, for example, a longer term plan is reaching out to schools, colleges. If actually you require the person to have a university degree, why in the first place? And then secondly, not necessarily going for Oxbridge or Redbrook universities, but going for universities that have a more diverse candidate base.
Exactly. Yeah.
So some different things there in terms of short-term actions, working with recruiting through a whole range of diverse media. If you always use the same source or the same recruitment agency, mixing it up, challenging our recruitment agencies in terms of actually what's your process on diversity, how do you attract talent? in terms of broadening your reach, geographical, making sure your hiring managers are trained up, and then longer term in terms of reaching out to other diverse groups and actually encouraging them to work within insurance. I think insurance is, many people fall into insurance. I think that, I've got 3 sons in their 20s, and I don't think any of them were touched by insurance as they were going through school and through career planning. They had friends who wanted to be lawyers, doctors, etc., etc.
Yeah.
I don't think they had anyone that wanted to be an insurance professional. So I think we've got work to do, all of us, for the good of the insurance sector, which is touching our younger people and explain to them about the wonderful careers within insurance and encouraging them to come into insurance, to consider that as part of their career. So I hope that's given some ideas.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I think something that I took away from that was asking why. I don't think we ask why enough. I think when someone says this is what needs to be done, we just say, okay, this is what needs to be done. But being able to be comfortable to challenge and actually be able to say, okay, why do we need that? Is it actually an essential requirement, or is it just there to tick a box and say we've done this? I think the more people start to say why and understand what's behind that thought process, the easier it'll be for us to make any sort of change. So I think that's such a big part of moving forward.
I think you're absolutely right, Mira, in that often within HR functions, hiring managers, recruitment is a very time-consuming part of our job. Sometimes you've got more vacancies than you really need, and you're just trying to get the candidates in as quick as possible. We've got some empty seats, everyone's overworked, etc., etc. So you want to recruit the positions quickly. But of course, every person that comes in the business, it's a significant headcount cost, and it should be about long-term success of the organisation. So it's about getting the right person now who's going to build performance of the organisation going forward. And if that means then bringing more diverse candidates with that greater ideas of innovation, creativity, experience, knowledge, etc., ideas generation, that's got to be good for the long-term benefit of the organisation. You've got to be able to justify taking a bit longer.
Yeah, completely agree. Becky, Aaron, did either of you want to have anything to add on this specific topic?
Yeah, like I was going to say, I agree with what Karen said. I think it's very important to not fall into the trap of addressing the symptoms before addressing the cause. I think creating an environment which is conducive to accessing a broader spread of the community, in terms of education, the socioeconomic background, ability levels, and so on, I think is really important, first of all. But then you will come up with the right objectives, strategies, and tactics that you can act on to make that change. But I think you have to do it in that order. So I think I agree with that. One of the things I found, though, is I think people can be a lot more explicit in the types of people that they're looking for, and in the ways that they show that they welcome applications from these people. This is one of the challenges I think the city generally has had, in particular insurance. I so concur with what Karen said about insurance. Most people tend to fall into it. I fell into it. Once you fall into it, you can't get out. That's a good thing. But it's being able to fall in the first place. I fell into it, and I've just been working with insurers and brokers for forever. But I think it's being able to access people, knowing how do we communicate that in the way that we put together vacancies and adverts for applications and so on. I think that's really important. I mean, maybe I'll talk a bit more about that later on, depending on the questions that you ask. But I definitely think that's something that we can do in terms of letting people know that you want them, you welcome them, is going to increase their desire to apply to you. And I think that's half the battle.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting what you say about adverts. That's actually something I did want to go on to next. Because something that has come up when I've spoken to various hiring managers as a route to be able to reach out to different groups of people is looking at not just the channels that we advertise, but also the language that we're using in adverts. to be able to actually, because there was actually a study that I read about more related to gender, and there was they ran a study. They sent an advert out and they looked at the percentage of women that applied against the percentage of men. And what they found was certain language on the advert was putting women off from applying. Things like superstar and words that seemed very male, male driven. Even though the job could be done by a female, it wasn't a gender specific. You don't get gender specific jobs, but it wasn't a job where they needed someone who was a male, or they were looking for sort of a male person. But the language that they used threw off a lot of women. And what they also found was that when male and women look at jobs, a male would apply to a job if he ticks 50% of the criteria, whereas a woman will only apply to the job if she feels she ticks 80% of the criteria. So also things like the length of job adverts and what you're putting in as essential criteria, you can easily, put off the groups that you're trying to attract. And I'm pretty sure there's similar studies in looking at ethnicities and socioeconomic backgrounds and things like that. So adverts play such a huge part, I think, in terms of branding and being able to attract the different groups of people that you're trying to attract. So I did sort of want to run through, because I know we've spoken about adverts, Vicky, and sort of the language and things like that as well. But before I do that, as I said, I do love polls, so I have got another one for you guys. So I'm just going to quickly run through that now. Let me just stop. Just realize I
was just going to say, I was talking to Aaron on the weekend, and we were talking about roles, adverts, and so on. And it just keys into your point. I just wanted to get this in because it keys into your point about some of the wording and so forth. So some of the wording can be quite off-putting if you don't feel that you fit exactly what's being said. And so you're not encouraged to be yourself. In fact, in order to do it, you have to sometimes. It seems like you're encouraged to lie. And we were talking about. Aaron and I were talking about some roles where if you apply for them and you say what your disability is, it reduces the likelihood of you getting it. But if you take it out, right, and apply for the same role, then the chances of you getting it become a lot higher. I'm sure Aaron will talk about that later on, but I think I just wanted to mention it.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. I completely agree. So again, I'm just going to run this, give you guys 60 seconds to answer. Don't be shy, as Vicky says. So the question is, would more inclusive vacancy adverts promote greater trust between minorities and senior management in the London market? Yes, no, worth the try, or not relevant? Okay, this is interesting.
Where's the leaning towards?
There's two that it's pretty neck and neck at the moment. It could go either way.
Sounding familiar, neck and neck, Karen?
Yeah.
Like the whole driving thing?
I think this question is a very interesting one because, say vacancy adverts, I'm sure, some people maybe not knowingly put certain words in there in order to try and attract the type of person they want for that role. So, that's my opinion on it anyway. Yeah,
I think there's a lot of technology now to help people not do that actually, and just do it in a way which is, more equitable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right, I'm just gonna share those now. So it was neck and neck between yes and worth a try, but then all of a sudden at the end, worth a try literally went towards that finish line and ended up on top.
Yeah.
So we've got 29% have said yes, it would be useful and it'll create greater trust. Nobody said no, so clearly there is something in that. 63% said worth a try, and 8% felt it was not relevant. So what are your thoughts on that?
Me? Can I take?
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, first of all, this is one big education for me, because I think if you look behind the answers there, the worth a try would suggest that they're not as immediately suggests that ads aren't as inclusive as they could be, right? If people are saying it's worth a try, then obviously we all recognize, consciously or unconsciously, that a lot of vacancy adverts aren't as inclusive as they could be. So I think they should be. I mean, I've seen, one of the things around accessing more Black, Asian minorities, for example, I think can be done is just to say that. I just think, say, what is your, identify where you are disproportionately underrepresented, and say, we are in this division, we are disproportionately underrepresented by people of this category, that category, this category, and we welcome applications from you. I don't know why we don't do that. And I've seen it outside of the city, but I've never seen it, or I don't see it in insurance enough. I've seen it for some disability, but not nowhere near enough. I mean, I don't know what your experience is, Karen or Aaron.
Yeah, do you know, I absolutely agree. And it seems like a lot more authentic than just saying we're an equal opportunities employer.
Yeah.
It's really powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you were to read that, you'd think, interesting. Okay, yeah, okay, great. I've definitely got a better chance of getting this job. Actually, they genuinely might want me.
Yeah.
So I think that's really powerful. I think also that, if we're honest with ourselves, that how often do we actually review our job descriptions? In that quite often they are a bit of a cut and paste job. And we're carrying the same wording from job description to job description, sort of job done. Actually, maybe it's time for an overhaul and to pass out our adverts and our job descriptions to multiple stakeholders and getting some input in terms of how does this land with you? Is this job, does it, as the advert describes, is it something that you would want to apply for? Does it sound like an interesting job or an organisation I want to work for? And actually, how does it hit you? Are there any words there that would make you think, don't think this is the place for me? I think that that would be time well spent.
That's so true. Sorry, go on.
So like my opinion, as with most things in life, there's a huge difference between, saying you're going to put, inclusive words on your job descriptions and things, bits and bobs of that, but the real power comes in action. Whether that company, they may put out a vacancy which says, we welcome applications from X, Y, and Z groups, but whether that then people then go on to actually get it, that's the real differentiator in my opinion.
Yeah.
And some integrity there, isn't there? Because if you've got to do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. It's one thing to talk the talk. Are you walking the walk? And I think sometimes as well, a lot of the larger firms in insurance say things like, we use, I don't know what the actual technical terms that they use, but they say that we use a certain type of approach and methodology which stops us from being biased. But ultimately, you have to sit down with that person or persons, and you're going to have an exploratory discussion with them about their career and their suitability for the role, and to what extent are we are we weighting our observations of people and their ability to do a job in the same way as we are in the adverts that we're writing? Are we actually giving giving people more of an opportunity to show how they are suited to a role, or are we putting them into a box if they just don't fit our traditional qualifications or criteria?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think what you mentioned about action is such a big thing. I don't know if it's worth, I don't know if companies should really be publishing what they're getting out of these adverts as well, and actually saying, we've recruited people from such and such background this year or in the last quarter, to show that they are actually taking action, and it isn't just it's not just wording on an advert. Because I don't really see many companies saying, oh, this is what we've done, or this is what we've achieved, at the back of our recruitment campaign or anything like that. So it sometimes may seem like nothing's really happening in the background, whereas if companies would sort of step up and say, actually, we've been recruiting for these roles, and we've actually been able to find people from such and such background and successfully hire them into the business. I feel like that's such a powerful statement to make, and it if anything, it only attracts more people from those backgrounds to come apply to these companies, because they can see they're following through from what they're saying.
I also think, Mira, that I see more agencies today looking for an upfront fee. And as an HR person, that's something that in the past I've been a bit like, okay, well, recruit for me, find me great candidates and I'll pay your bill. But actually, where I'm pushing anyone that works for the CI in terms of think diversity, think inclusion, that if I want different stakeholders to provide me with a more diverse range of candidates, talent, for example, that takes more time. It's when we're talking about potential rather than experience, it's easier to look for a candidate that's got a university degree than it is to look for candidates that don't have a degree, but they have relevant experience. That takes longer, actually. And the reality is that, you've got to then incentivize people, you've got to pay people for their time. So I get it in terms of now either paying a retainer, so organizations can provide you with a talent bench, or actually recognizing the fact that if you're serious about this, actually paying people for doing it.
I was just gonna say also, I think it's really important. Well, I'd encourage, what I don't see, I know speaking to Karen before, she mentioned that they do something like this at the CII, but just to find people who specialize in disproportionately underrepresented members of the community. So if you've got, if you're disproportionately underrepresented by Black and Asian people in a certain part of an organization, why not find a recruitment company that specializes in hiring those types of people and give them exclusives, time-bound exclusives, obviously, for a role before giving, and match it to the disproportionate percentage. That way, but this all goes back, I think all of this goes back to that whole not treating the symptoms and starting with the cause. If you focus on creating an environment conducive to this type of recruitment, then you can set objectives, and these can be some of the tactics that you can use. But I don't see that enough. I don't know how you do it, Karen, or what your experiences are, Aaron, on the other end. But I just think, why not? If I want more women, if I'm underrepresented by women in a certain sector of the markets, for example, or of an organization, why not give it to a woman-led recruitment organization that specializes in getting women in the insurance sector? Why wouldn't you do that?
I really like that. I really like that opinion, Buki. But at the same time, it kind of alludes to the point Karen made, recruiters and HR companies and stuff, they're always under such pressure if a vacancy appears in their company, say the senior managers will be like, right, we need that role filled within 2 weeks. So that pressure from sort of the senior management, as I said, may force some recruitment companies to maybe not take a wider approach into looking for, or say waiting a longer period until people from a more diverse background apply for the role. Just echoing what you said there, Buki, I like what you really like what you said there about going to sort of exclusive recruiters to fill the gap in a sector within a company.
Aaron, I absolutely agree with you. And what we did at the CII was that we got executive buy-in. So people would then expect that days to hire, which we measure, that there might be a reduction. In fact, it ended up as there's been no deterioration, but absolutely got executive buy-in to, okay, effectively there's going to be a 5-day hold on this because we give specialist agencies a head start.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's something about working with those specialist agencies in advance to make sure that they understand your organisation and hopefully are building up what I call the bench, so that by the time that, good HR recruiter, a good recruiter is always going to be identifying their bench, so that when the vacancy comes up, they've already got 3 people sat on that bench waiting to be approached or keeping candidates warm. I think those sorts of techniques are really useful for making sure that you're bringing in the best talent.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So just a bit more background about myself. I work for a company called CDW. They're the largest IT reseller in the world. And I'm actually the co-lead of the Disability Support Network, which has been recently formed within the company. And me and my co-lead, we're actively going out and looking for sort of disabled recruiters, so we can, sort of maybe get more people involved in the company that way and tap into the extreme talent and benefits that having a disabled employee can bring to the workplace. But it's not just a case of that. We're also looking at ways we can train, managers of the people with, a wide range of disabilities, so that retention is very good as well. So that's just an idea of what we're doing from an IT company perspective.
Right.
That's brilliant. That's really good to know. I do want to touch on retention a little later, actually, because I think that's just as important as accessing people, is being able to keep hold of them. But Aaron, you've sort of mentioned some of the stuff you've been doing. I'm quite interested in your journey as a job applicant, because it'll be really, like I said, from a disability perspective, I've really struggled to find many people in senior management positions, and people that have actually made it to the top. So I'm quite interested to hear sort of from your side, what can insurance learn from the experiences as a job applicant, and your observations of recruitment in general as it applies to people with disabilities?
I think the biggest one there, is just to never have any bias to a CV. If you see someone says they're disabled on their CV, from a personal perspective, I kind of get the impression that some recruiters or some hiring managers sort of see that and they go, like run for the hills because they're scared. But that ultimately comes down to sort of a lack of education, because they don't know or understand what that disability means. And for me myself, my brain's still fine. It's just my legs that I can't use. And then, as I mentioned earlier, my teammate Bobby, who I race with, as I said, he's got severe autism. And I know, obviously hearing from him, he's found it extremely hard to get work after graduating from college with a level 3, I think it's mechanic in qualification. But like I said, I know, speaking to him, he's put on some CVs which he sends out to some companies, that he is autistic, and he'll leave off that he's autistic on other CVs, which will send out to very similar companies, and the ones which he sends out which say he isn't autistic, he seems to get a much better response rate from than the ones where he does say he's autistic. So I think it's just it's a kind of a case of that, just not normalizing disability. Now, whether that will happen or not, I'm not sure, but I think there's still great steps that can be made.
Certainly within the insurance sector, I'm pleased to see organisations like the Insurance Upper Club doing some work around neurodiversity and trying to increase people's understanding, and actually getting people to understand that people with, say, autism are very, very employable, but actually there are some jobs in the organisation that they are your ideal candidate. There are skills they're extra skills that certain people have because of their makeup, their genetics, because of their experience, that make them even better, stronger candidates. And actually there's a bit of an awareness here required. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, so in Team Brit, our major sponsor is Brit Insurance. So obviously, I'm sure you guys have heard of them. Now, when we was at Silverstone last weekend, we actually hosted some of them in hospitality as well, and I mentioned to them about this talk we're doing here. And one of the employees there has told me that they've put on extra sort of mandatory holiday days for people with alternative religions. So hopefully that will help them on board and retain more minority employees as well, just by giving them extra days off to celebrate any religious festivals which they need to.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Yeah,
no, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Aaron. I think there's a lot there that we can be learning from, and actually using that to make it, like you said, normalize it, not make it seem different, or not make people like yourself, or you mentioned Bobby, have to remove that from their CV to feel like they can get an opportunity. I mean, that definitely needs to stop. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. So I'm just sort of mindful of time. So before we do move on to Q&A, because there have been a few questions, so thank you guys who've shared their questions and comments. I did want to go back to that retention point, because it's so easy to be sitting here saying we need to do this and this to bring diverse people from diverse backgrounds into the industry, but I think it's just as important to make sure that we're retaining this talent, so we're not having to start over and over again and go through the process. So, you know, from your guys' perspective, what would be your advice to companies to make sure that, you know, they're thinking about how to retain this talent, and it's not just stopping it, just bringing people in?
Yeah, so
It's open questions. So
okay, so a couple of thoughts from me is that, first of all, making sure that you know, we value and we appreciate diversity in that who we're working with. So you know, you might be working with a group of people and other people have a different way of approaching a problem, a different way of getting to the solution, and actually if solutions reach, that's right. So we don't all have to go at it the same way. I think looking at organizations, processes and systems and stuff, and actually, are they really there for the benefit of the project, or is it actually for the benefit of the organization? Because we've all got different ways of working. So be mindful in terms of the language that we use. Sometimes, you know, at the CI, we've had some open forums and we try to encourage people to share the language that they hear that they may feel is offensive, and let's call it out. You know, microaggressions, let's call it out, because actually sometimes we are actually quite nervous about the language we use because we don't really understand the impact, or as individuals we hear language that we don't like but we don't call it out either. Yeah, being mindful of that, and ultimately making sure that as individuals in an organization, respect is huge, and that if everyone accepts the fact that we actually do, that's our starting point, we trust and respect each other, so that sort of cultural aspect is important. And that if things then happen that make somebody feel uncomfortable, that's not deliberate, and actually we'll do something about it and learn from it.
yeah,
I think these sorts of values are important.
yeah, I agree. I you know, I particularly agree on the latter points as well. I think it's very important. You know, if you look at that Lloyd survey which came out last year, was it March or somewhere? It's last year, 2020. And it talked about you know, trust levels within the markets, and you know, I think in particular Black employees didn't, you know, it went down basically based on color, basically, but you know, in terms of trust of senior management. And I think one of the issues around that is that a lot of people aren't, I mean, there are a few issues around it, but one of the issues is promotions and seeing people in senior roles. And a lot of people feel they're not given the opportunities, the same or equal opportunity to escalate their careers. So I think it's very important to equip people within an organization with the skills to navigate the kind of bias which stops them, or they perceive stops them from progressing. And if you can do that, then you can break down the lack of trust levels, and suddenly you start to dissipate the perceived bias which stops people from you know, moving up in organizations, and then you retain them, because that, you know, people don't leave companies, they leave managers, they don't, you know. So if I have a greater trust of my manager because I can speak more openly to them, then I'm more likely to stay and more likely to move up, as opposed to having this internal tension which builds up, which stops me from having the same opportunities because my disposition is one which isn't conducive to me being seen as a management type person. So I think it's really important that we equip people with the skills to navigate bias.
And measure success.
And measure,
so at CII, we have an engagement survey, and one of the questions we ask is the extent to which you feel free to be yourself. So that for us is our inclusion measure, because we've got all the data and the stats, the dashboard, the actions, etc. But where we want to get to is that everyone feeling free to be themselves. So that's how we measure it, and I think that that's a useful, you know, what's the saying? What gets measured gets improved, or something.
Yeah. I was going to give a point on that, but I just want to hear Aaron's before I say mine. But I really concur with that. But I'm sure Aaron's going to say something which is really important. Sorry.
Yeah, so I agree with what Karen said there. A lot of it, and you, Buki, a lot of it is about feedback. You know, questioning and feedback. You know, being a disabled employee often throws up differing challenges. So depending on the type of disability you have, there may be different challenges across the board. Just to give you one example, in a previous employment, I was at the work and the fire alarm went off. So it was first recognized that was actually no one within the building who was actually fire or evacuation chair trained. They have to be specially trained to use an evacuation chair to get a disabled person down the stairs. And initially we uncovered the fact that no one's trained to do that. And then a later alarm, when I was in a different building, there was a registered fire lift within the building, which obviously was registered safe for use in fire. But we went around to it and we actually found it was broken. So a lot of it, is the feedback. They're the sort of questions I'll take on into my future employment. If I get a new role with another company, there'll be key questions which are asked to start off with, just so I know that I'm safe. But then, like I said, it's all about questioning and feedback. So a lady with it as part of our disability support group at CDW, she's autistic. Now, within CDW, they're trying to implement a hybrid working model, but that for her and her autism just wouldn't work. She feels the need to have, I think this is humans in general, but for her even more so, she prefers to have two work screens which she works from in exactly the same position. Now, as I said, we're creatures of habit. So, for me, myself coming to a computer and the screens are all in weird positions, I think, oh, right, I've got to mess around with them and stuff. But for her with her autism, it would sort of trigger her and may mean that her productivity level for the whole day is actually severely reduced. So whereas myself, it probably only effective for maybe 10, 15 minutes, as I say, for her, it would be that full day thing. So it's just about questioning and feedback for a disabled employee. We're looking to implement this. Will this work for you? If it doesn't, how would it impact you? And then it's just about generally finding ways around it to accommodate that person even more, so that it does mean that they can work at their full potential for the whole day.
And being a bit flexible, isn't it? So she needs a fixed workstation.
Definitely.
In your new hybrid working environment, flexible working environment, okay, it's hot desking for most people, but actually for some people who recognize that they need a fixed workstation. That's it. Their name's on it. It's theirs.
Yeah. Correct.
Yeah, completely agree. Thank you for that, guys. I think all of those are really useful points and things that actually we can be thinking of and implementing to bring people in, but also create that inclusive environment so that we are thinking about inclusion, not just diversity. So I've just been looking through a few questions. So I just want to use the last few minutes. There's 2 or 3 questions that I've picked out that I think were quite interesting. So it'd be great to sort of get your guys' take on it. So the first question, this is a really interesting one. I think a lot of HR feel pressure with this anyway. So managers are already putting pressure on HR for how quickly they desperately need resource and how busy they are. We struggle to get them to review job descriptions regularly as well. So how do we get managers involved and to be more understanding if finding the right candidate takes a bit longer? Karen, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, you need executive buy-in. So I think at the top of the organisation, we need an understanding in terms of why we might take a bit longer. I think something around the make sure that job descriptions are accurate and up to date. I mean, sort of like you think, God, doesn't seem a bit crazy going out to market with a job description that isn't up to date. So I guess trying to get people to see the end result and actually, it's going to be a better job done if some of these bits are completed in the early stages. And trying to get people, hiring managers, think more strategically about their vacancies. So if actually you're not going to update a job description until the person's left the organisation you desperately need to recruit, it's probably a bit late. Actually, now might be the time to make sure that all job descriptions are updated now. So in advance of then there being the need, that might help. But I think absolutely that, because as an HR function, you don't want to be seen as someone saying no, or we can't do that. But actually you want to make sure that that is part of the organisation's way of working. And as an HR person, you're supporting or coaching people to do something that is seen to be strategically important and something I think minds change.
Yeah. I was going to say on that, it goes back to the cause and symptoms. I think create an environment which is conducive to having the patience required to create a more diverse and inclusive workforce. And I think if you do that, you can you can then hold yourself accountable for very clear objectives around that, and people will operate within that. So I think a degree of prescription is required at the beginning of the year or whenever, and you lay this all out, and so people operate within that framework. Because if if we just get into our year, get into our day, then these things are going to happen. You're just not going to have enough time, and people are just going to want to get things done and meet the immediate objective as opposed to the wider objective. So I think it's about having, treating the causes, and then before you deal with the symptoms.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll do sort of one final question. This one's actually for you, Aaron. So you spoke about your co-drivers within Team Brit, who I think are all male. What is the female representation like within the sport in terms of drivers with disabilities or other people with the team with disabilities? For example, mechanics, personal trainers, etc.
Yeah, so within the team, we have one disabled driver who's called Neris. She's got a quite considerable background. She was a gold medalist in weightlifting, I believe it was. She's got crazy goals. She wants to swim the British Channel at some point this year. And then we do have a female engineer who's just been taken on called Raquel. So she's just come into the team too. But that being said, motorsport as general is still quite a male dominated sport. That, as I mentioned, we've got Raquel and Neris in the team who are sort of breaking that habit down and showing that the ladies can get out there and do it as well. As much as us men don't like being beaten by a woman, I'm sure it will happen someday soon. But it's just a case of hopefully with them being in the team they're showing that there's no reason more disabled people or more women shouldn't want to get involved in the team, whether that be driving or mechanicking. They're just as capable as the males.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that.
And I'll just maybe.
Yeah. And I'll just leave you with a comment. There was one of the first comments we got actually. So it was when we were talking about the first topic around widening talent pools and actually bringing in diversity. The comment was, at a higher level, there is less diversity to choose from, as has been very traditionally white. It is opening up now. I think that's something that I definitely, in the next topic, we're going to talk a little bit about leadership and diversity and inclusion in leadership. But I think that's another big challenge. And I guess the retention and what we've talked about, being able to retain talent, having progression, having development is probably the only way we're going to do that. And aside from that, it's what you mentioned, Karen, earlier, is bringing experienced people from outside of the industry in to fill that gap straight away. I think that's probably the quickest way that we can plug that gap, is bringing that management level, but not necessarily needing that insurance background to be able to do the job.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So like this is a great discussion, guys. I'm really, like, I feel like I've got a lot out of this, and I'm pretty sure our audience has as well. So I just wanted to thank you guys again for your time today and having this discussion with me and with our audience. It's been amazing. I'm just going to send some of the links onto the chat box. So I'm just going to share our LinkedIn profiles, and then there's Bookie. I've shared your profile and a little bit about Team Brit as well. For those of you who are interested in reading more, or if you guys are wanting to sort of continue discussion, had any other questions or comments, then do feel free to reach out to us. I'm pretty sure any of us will be more than happy to carry on this conversation. And as I mentioned, we are going to be running another webinar next month. That's going to be looking at diversity in leadership. We'll be sharing more information with you guys after this webinar. So again, do register and join us so we can continue this conversation. And yes, thank you again, Karen, Aaron, and Vicky. Like, your time has been invaluable, and I've really enjoyed it. I hope you guys have enjoyed the discussion too.
Yeah,
really good. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you guys soon.
All right.
Thanks for having us, Mira.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Always a pleasure.